View from the Gutters presents the Olympia Comics Festival 2015 Comics Podcasting Panel. This episode was recorded live at the Olympia Comics Festival.
You want to get this party started?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
you guys.
So, thanks for coming. I'm good, right?
Yeah, go.
Okay.
You're good.
I'm good. Thanks for coming to the Olympia Comics Festival. And thanks for coming to our panel, Comics Podcasting in Olympia.
Yay.
So, I'm Monty Pell. I'll be your moderator. And I'm with these lovely people to my left. So, let's start. Say who you are and what podcast you're from.
I'm Joe Preti. I'm on View from the Gutters.
I'm Kayleigh Fleeman, also on View from the Gutters.
And I'm Tobiah Panshin, also from View from the Gutters.
I am Andrew Chard from View from the Gutters and Out of the Fridge.
Eric Manix from Out of the Fridge.
Dylan Donaldson from Arc Reactions Podcast.
John Waite from Arc Reaction Podcast and also Bat Books for Beginners, which you're also on and forgot to mention.
Beautiful. So let's start with what brought you guys to podcasting. With whoever would like to pick that up.
I started listening to podcasts because I was a care provider for 13 years, and the last gentleman I worked with, he had cerebral palsy. He was in a wheelchair, and he wanted to go for walks all day, all the time. And I like to do that because I got us out of the house, but I needed something to do, and I got tired of all my records pretty quick. So I just would load up every podcast I could find on video games, comics, you name it, on my iPod and just walk for hours and hours and hours listening to just whatever tickled my fancy. And as far as getting into podcasting as something that I wanted to do, I blame View from the Gutters. Because they came into the shop. I work at Olympia Cards and Comics, the other local shop in town. And they quizzed me about being on. Kind of, I felt like I had like this, I won't say interrogation, but more like, what's up, what are you into, what are you know, kind of a nice conversation. They went and conferred and then came back like, all right, we want you on. So I was like, all right, am I in the Illuminati now? Did that just happen? Yeah. So that's my
You're not
secret
supposed
origin.
to talk about the Illuminati, Manix. We've told you that before.
Just these, I've never seen you before. Who are you?
Manix learned the secret handshake.
Yeah, when I got back into comics in like 2006, because I read them as a kid and then I kind of fell off, I just started going on the internet and like trying to figure out where to read, where to start, and Around Comics popped up, the comic book podcast, and I just started listening to them, and I got totally hooked. And I was like, I want to do that. I know stuff. I mean, I was wrong, but
Yeah, I got microphones. I got computers.
So, yeah, that's how I started. I don't know. How about you guys?
So ours actually started at Emerald City. It was 2013, yeah. Me and John and my girlfriend were sitting in a panel. It was just after the AVX. I'm a big Marvel fanboy. It was after Avengers vs. X-Men, and me and John got talking about whether Cyclops was right or the Avengers were right. I was squarely on the
Cyclops is never right.
You were wrong, sir. You were wrong, and you were full of blasphemy. Cyclops was right. And we just got talking about it, and John and I both are huge Kevin Smith fans, and Kevin Smith has like 1,000 podcasts. So we're like, we're having this great conversation. Why don't we just start a podcast? And then we did, and been doing it for 3 years now.
I just love the sound of my own voice.
Yeah,
That's great.
Like so many things, so many bad decisions in my life, it started when I was very drunk. And I was standing on Andrew Chard's porch with him and Joe. And they're like, we're doing a podcast. Do you want in? And I said, absolutely, because I felt the need to make a terrible, terrible decision, as so many of my choices in life are. But I've loved comics all my life.
Usually Joe's fault, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I've been into comics all my life. I've been listening to podcasts for many years. And so when the opportunity came up, I just jumped on it. Because, I mean, how could you not just want to talk endlessly into a microphone about how right you are and how wrong everyone else is when they're in no position to fight back?
Yeah.
You say
Cyclops was
talk,
right.
but that's not what we do. Who doesn't want to scream into a microphone about how everybody else is wrong, I think is the question.
You guys have a very different opinion about what the show is for.
I got into View from the Gutters specifically because I would listen to them in my car and just start yelling. I'd just get really angry while I was driving and start cutting people off and just like, you're so wrong. And after a while of yelling at these two, they decided it was a good idea to have me on the show. And then after some more badgering, they totally decided of their own free will that I should be a host.
Yeah, our fan feedback, we did a listener survey, and Kayleigh was our favorite guest from the fans. So they seem to agree with her as well. So
rightfully so.
You're not, yeah.
To be fair, Kayleigh screams at everybody about everything, so...
I've never been screamed at by Kayleigh, just throwing that out there. I think you guys are doing something wrong. She's always very pleasant to me.
That's because you're a lovely person.
Thank you. See?
I just want to say for the record, Kayleigh has only given me one black eye.
I don't think Kayleigh actually knows Eric at all. She thinks he's a lovely person.
All right. Is there a particular angle or viewpoint that you guys want to get across as far as your perspectives on comics that you guys bring to your shows at all?
I mean, I named my show Out of the Fridge, so yes. Yeah, I mean, we started with Kelly and Allison, who unfortunately couldn't be here today.
They're at a wedding.
They had a blog that they had started on Tumblr, and it was just, female perspective, writing reviews just from their point of view, and I actually started on the show as kind of just an advisor to them, because Manix, you're a nerd, and I've been on Views a few times, so I had a very marginal understanding of how plugging in mics and all that stuff kind of work and getting it out there. I'm your expert, so ask me whatever you have. And then it morphed into, you should just be on the show with us, and I was very honored to have that, because I hadn't assumed that was going to be a part of it at the time. And so it's funny because if you listen back to the first episode, we were like, oh, we're not going to be too political and we'll try not to ruffle too many feathers and we'll also try not to curse. And then by episode 2, we're like, fuck that. And then the name is Out of the Fridge, so how can you not be political with a name like that? So now that's kind of the whole purpose, and we wholeheartedly, go there with whatever book we cover. It's, all right, if it's something Frank Miller did, what did he do this time? And, as a lady that reads comics, how do you feel about this character being completely, put in the shadows so that this male character can be, the hero and this person's just set dressing or whatever? And that's kind of mostly our viewpoint. And
it's also kind of a unique perspective, too, because all three of you work at the same comic book store.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I used to work at that comic book store, too.
Yep.
So we have a very different perspective on, what the show is about and how to get the word out on comics. When I started Views, it was all about exposure for comics. Hey, these are the books that I'm really enjoying. And my job at the comic book store, my favorite part of the job was just introducing people to new comics. And be like, oh, you haven't heard of this? Let me show you some stuff you might like. What are your favorite kinds of comics? Let me find you something that you're really going to enjoy, and just keep going through the lists until they find something that they love and they can fall in love with comics in the same way that I did. And so Views was just a way for me to do that for a larger audience and just be like, we've done 120 episodes, it's 120 different books, as well as some bonus episodes that we've brought exposure to. And that was, for me, that was the genesis.
Yeah, one of my absolute favorite things about doing the podcast is when we get emails from people saying either I've never read comics or I haven't read comics in 15 years. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what I was looking at. And you guys helped make me love comics again.
Yeah.
You helped me figure out where to get started and what to look at. Yeah. And just to feel like you've contributed to somebody's life in that way is immensely gratifying, aside from the fact that I get to tell all these people how wrong they are about the comics that they like, because obviously my reason for liking comics is far superior.
Yeah. Did you guys have a specific goal in mind?
I was gonna piggyback off of what Manix said. The way they started the podcast is how we treat our podcast. We aim to not be too overly political about our particular views, although we don't shy away from saying if we think something is misogynist or racist or something that really doesn't belong in the book. But we try and not belittle religion or anyone's political views or anything like that. Plus, we do keep our podcast PG just to have an all ages audience available.
We tried.
I know they tried and weren't
apparently
able to.
You can't censor Manix, so.
It was Chris Johnson, friend of the show, actually. I blame him because I was fine on the first episode and he couldn't.
Yeah.
That's my excuse. I'm sticking to it.
And what it's done for me personally is it's forced me to read comics I wouldn't normally read. because we try and do a variety of Marvel, DC. We're right in the middle of a couple independent ones that we're releasing right now. And we get contacted by independent publishers fairly often, and so I get exposed to books I would never pick up otherwise. Yeah. And so that's a great benefit. And then we found just sort of a segment of the show that evolved that we used to call the notes section. Now we're calling it Education Alley, where just like vocabulary words that we didn't know going into it, we'll look up and read the definitions. Historical aspects, there's a part to Captain America Winter Soldier where a village in France got slaughtered by a rogue Nazi major, and we looked that up and shared that on the podcast. And like just these things that are just offhandedly mentioned in comics, but that lead you to go digging and find a new piece of educational material that you didn't know about before. So it's a lot of fun doing all that.
And both John and I are big history buffs, so a lot of these comics have a historical standing. Captain America Winter Soldier, of course, or another one we did is the old Star Trek, the original series, See on the Edge of Tomorrow. Or Forever, See on the Edge of Forever.
Harlan Ellison, yeah.
Yeah, Harlan Ellison's book. And it was a French battle, I think it was Versailles, but I can't recall off the top of my... Versailles, that's right, Versailles. And it was just reading up on that and getting understanding the historical context and all this stuff that was going down, and really, shedding light on stuff and learning stuff on our own about history and about stuff we, already have a passion for.
Well, I'll ask you guys this, then I'll open up to audience questions. What is it about being in Olympia that you think kind of encourages a sort of comics scene and lets you guys feel, able the fact that you can do shows here?
Just walk around downtown. I mean, just look at every building. There's some gorgeous piece of street art. There's sculptures everywhere. I mean, I'm looking at a gigantic fish right now made out of fucking beads. But I mean, there's gorgeous art everywhere. And twice a year we've got the Arts Walk down here, where there's live music playing and street performance on top of, you go into whatever local bank and people have their paintings up and photographs and things like that. So I feel like we're in a town where art in all aspects has been really celebrated. So it's easy to get excited about that energy.
Yeah, I had 3 words: Gabby's, Danger Room. Like, the comics community in this town is so great, and we have 2 absolutely phenomenal stores that are encouraging of all different people to come in and be a part of that community. You hear about so many people where they go into their local comic store and they just get run out on a rail. Like, the owners or the people who work there want nothing to do with them because they're not the right kind of comic reader. Which is absolutely the wrong attitude to have. And I think one of the strengths of our show is that we have so many different types of people who are interested in different comics coming and having a conversation with us. Like, I think that is an incredibly strong thing and a great thing to have, just in terms of having a conversation with people and being able to appreciate different types of art and being exposed to different types of art.
Well, and I think there's also, Olympia is definitely... and I think this is partially because Evergreen is here, but also just the culture here is one of awareness of, I guess, societal ills. It creates an environment where it's not just acceptable to talk about things that have plagued comics for years, things like sexism, racism, things of that nature. But it's a very safe space in which to talk about those things, and I think. People that are drawn to Olympia are aware of these things, and so that's one of the things that's hugely important to me in podcasting, is just to be able to kind of call out things like that. But yeah, I mean, if you look at Gabby's store out in Lacey and the Danger Room, just the wealth of knowledge there, the access to just about any kind of book you could want, it's overwhelming. I got back into comics in about 2006 too, and it was because of Gabby that I did. So if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't be up here, and Toby's life would be a lot easier, and we can't have that.
I just want to go ahead and Olympia is such a punk rock town. It is so willing to tackle and just be so open about those ills of social society and talking about these things. And a lot, like you said, a lot of the misogyny and racism, sexism that was present, but also a lot of things that comic books have tackled, like tackling misogyny, tackling racism. And Olympia is just such a great town for that. It's such a punk rock town. It feels so just open and friendly and accepting of human beings as human beings.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think with all of our shows, it's definitely important for us to note that comics are for everyone, and to get that word out there is something that I feel like Olympia embodies, that, comics and the arts are for everyone. And I definitely feel that in Olympia, so that helps us make a show. So,
well, and going back to the viewpoint, right? It's like everybody should be reading comics.
Yeah.
At this point in comicsdom, there is literally something for everybody. There is no reason for people to be ignoring comic books because they're just superheroes. It's like you can find a comic book about anything.
Yeah.
I did an episode of a spin-off show we do called Back Matter about Logic Comics, which was an autobiographical comic of Bertrand Russell, who's the father of mathematical logic. Like, seriously. That's like, most people don't even know who Bertrand Russell is, right? But like, that's the breadth of comics today, and there's no reason for people not to be reading them. They're great. They're a great medium. They're capable of expressing so much emotion and beauty that, I have a great deal of love for them, and sharing that is being able to share that with people, even if it's only a handful, is an awesome thing.
Yeah, we want people to love the things we love.
Yeah.
It's almost as if comics have the same value and ability to express ideas as traditional literature or something. Oh, my God,
you didn't go there.
I know.
You didn't go there.
Brought a tear to my eye. You guys are so right. All right, so we have all these great minds in one place. If there's anything when you guys are wondering about it all, feel free to give it out to them.
Any questions?
Don't all jump up at once.
Yeah, we can.
The Danger Room comic bag says on it, everyone should read comics, no exception.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a mandate. You're not allowed to not like comics.
Yeah.
We're all about like free speech and all that, unless you don't like comics. And it's like, how dare you? Blasphemy. Lies.
It's heresy.
What would you guys say is the hardest thing about podcasting?
Finding the time.
Yeah,
I've got 2 kids. I work full time. I don't have a lot of free time. I try to be a good husband and a good father and devote as much of my free time to them as I can. But I think it's important for one's mental health to kind of do something selfish and do something just for you. And Fridge is that for me. It's just something that I get a lot of enjoyment out of, and I like to see my friends. And sometimes I do get in trouble because he's like, "You just say Andrew all the time." And all right, he's handsome. All right, I like to look at him. He's got a nice voice. That's a really bad impression of my wife, by the way. But all right, blame this.
Yeah.
Hey, you can't resist
yeah.
That sexy beard.
Yeah, these are faces not fit for television, except for me. No.
Speak for yourself.
No, I really have to agree with Manix. Just logistically getting a group of people into a room every week, recording, editing, getting it out there. Mm-hmm. It's a grind, especially when you're starting out. You don't have a whole lot of an audience. For the first year, I think that we were doing the podcast, we didn't have a single episode that had 100 downloads, which can be really demoralizing. But, we kept doing it. We kept working at it. We made it a regular thing. And as time went on, it just became part of the routine. It got a lot easier. But keeping that momentum going is hard.
It
nice. Really is.
For me, I edit views and out of the fridge, and then I just kind of hand them over to other people. Like, I give Toby the views episodes, and he handles all the web presence on that. I give the out of the fridge ones to Manix, and he handles that. So for me, it's nice to have people to help work with, because I think otherwise, it is. It's a total overload if you don't have people who can help you. The side benefit of that is I never see the numbers. I don't see any of the statistics or like how many people are downloading or whatever. So it helps keep me in the dark of how many people are downloading. So for the first 2 years, it didn't matter that no one was downloading. It's like, I'm going to make this. I don't care. And now that it's like, oh, we are getting downloads and things are really taking off. I'm kind of just so used to not paying attention that it's just, I'm going to just keep making the show that we're making, because obviously some people are enjoying it. So. I don't know.
I'll add to what all you guys have said is true as well, except for the last thing Chard said, because I do all the technical work.
See?
Although I will say for Bet Books for Beginners, all I have to do is produce the episode and hand it off to the website, and they handle the rest of it. So it's not quite 100% produced, but for Arc Reactions podcast, I'm doing 100% of the producing.
That's a huge workload.
And that's the one piece I wanted to add to what all you guys have said, is there is a very high learning curve to producing your own podcast if you have never done anything with audio beforehand. And it took me a while to get a good procedure down, and I've got a pretty good procedure down now, but just putting it the various places I have to on the web, it's still kind of a chore to me. After I've got the episode all done, all prepped, ready to go, and I'm ready for that step of upload and make the post, I'm like, oh, good grief, I don't want to do this. This is like at least an hour of my time like cutting and pasting and getting everything in the right format. And that's the part that I really struggle with right now. But like you said, just knowing you have an audience, or I guess no one really said that yet, but I assume that's where you're going by you got past 100 downloads. Just knowing I have an audience keeps me going. Knowing I'm going to be on panels like this, knowing we can go be media at Denver Comic Con, which we did over Memorial Day, and it was absolutely awesome, being treated like an actual media outlet, which is just amazing. That's the stuff that motivates me through those difficult times, because prepping the episodes, recording the episodes, and doing that stuff, ton of fun. Producing, not so much fun.
Social media is the worst. We, and by we I mean I, have to post the episode to 7 different places online, and I am never excited about it because it is easily 30 minutes of just copy, paste, click, load, and it's in no way fun.
Having said that, though, since I do most of the media stuff for Fridge, it is exciting, though, once you've done all that pain in the ass stuff, and then, it's up on Twitter, and then it's like, oh, this person shared it. Oh, that person shared it. Like, it's one thing when it's like your friend or whatever, and you're kind of like, well, I appreciate it, but you're my friend, maybe you feel. But they're like, I've never met that dude. He lives in Wisconsin. Thanks, man. Like, that's cool. Like, I produced something that you liked enough to, it's just minimal effort on your part to click that button, but you clicked it and you didn't have to. And so, and I'm assuming that you listened to it, and I appreciate that. I feel like, I'd make the show even if no one listened to it. But, yeah, it is nice to see. And I have, the unfair advantage of working at a comic shop. So I have people that walk up like, hey, Eric, thanks for recommending this book. And I'm like, oh, because I'm like, I didn't talk to you. But they're like, no, on the show. I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you. Cool. Right on. So that's kind of nice. Even if it's, one person ever, it's nice to know that, someone read a book because you said it was cool and they decided to check it out. And either they love it or they don't, but they tried it out.
I know for Arc Reactions, we get some of the weirdest interactions on social media in the positive way. One thing we had a small high school in Texas contact us, wanting us to do a online. They thought we were in Texas for some reason. I have no idea why, but they wanted us to do a little educational panel on how to get started doing a podcast. So just 101 stuff. But yeah, we got on a video conference call with those guys and I think we had 5 or 6 students sit in, and we just talked how to do podcasts and had a dialogue with them. It was completely off the wall. No idea why they thought we were in Texas, but hey, we were able to do something cool like that.
That was fun, learning all of the ins and outs of how to record podcasts, because I've been around music for a long time, but I tell you, when we started podcasting, I bought all the wrong stuff and recorded everything wrong, so the learning curve on that took a while, so it would have been nice to have something like that.
That leads into, if there's anyone
Kayleigh,
out there.
did you have anything?
I was just going to say, with the breadth of books that we cover on just a monthly basis, it's easy to experience burnout. Just where you kind of hit this point where you're like, oh my God, I don't care what this superhero is doing anymore. I hope they die. I hope they all die.
Listen to the Sandman long run and Chard's comments on Hellboy to hear what that's about.
And it's hard to kind of keep yourself excited about every new comic that you're reading, but it's really nice because once I kind of hit that point of, you know what, I think next week I'm gonna sit out. I can't do this right now. Somebody will recommend a book that I have never read, would have never read, but I started thumbing through it and it was awesome. Got really excited to talk about it. And so for me, it's just kind of keeping that level of excitement up and bringing it to every episode to talk about each new thing.
Well, even, there are plenty of books that we read and I like all right, but I'm like, what am I even going to say about this? Like, I enjoyed it, and they're going to be like, Joe, what'd you think? And I'm going to be like, I enjoyed it. It's just sometimes, and I mean, immediately, I'm the kind of I'm the kind of person that the very second you're like, I'm like, oh, I love reading comics. I read comics all the time. I have a huge collection of comics. Well, you have to read a comic for the podcast. Oh, I don't want to read it. I don't want to read comics anymore. I'm done. So I'm going to go play video games now.
Joe, I think that's a good point, though. Is I think we've all had a moment where you've brought a book that is very near and dear to you, and that can actually be very leave you in a vulnerable spot. Because it's going to get torn apart.
I won't. I don't do it. I don't bring...
I've done it, and it's like, I love this book, guys. Don't you love this book? They're like, oh, actually, it's this and this and this. And it's not like you can't enjoy the book, and I think it's important to acknowledge the problematic elements in anything that you love, and that doesn't mean that it's not a significant work or that it's a good work in any way. Like, for example... Daredevil Born Again, one of my all-time favorite books. Amazingly problematic, massive fridging of care and pain.
God, yes.
Book. I love that book. I read it every 6 months or so. I adore it. I recommend it all the time at the shop, but I always preface with, it has this major problem in it. As a feminist, I must tell you that this is a massive problem. If you can be okay with that, I think you will enjoy the book.
Well, even if it's not going to be... I mean, I'm always hesitant to bring the books that mean a great deal to me for whatever reason, just because just the thought of when you do a podcast with people you like, it's we play around and we're like we yell at each other about how we're wrong.
Doing podcasts with people you like.
Yeah, I do another one.
Oh, okay.
You guys aren't on it.
Is this the podcast in your head again?
You told me. I told you that in confidence. I really wish that you would keep it to yourself. It can be really difficult to talk about or to put yourself, just be vulnerable in general. And so I very rarely do it. If I have a book I really want to have a specific discussion about, I find another avenue to do it because it's hard to listen to people you care about be like, well, I really hated this book. And you're like, I love this book. This book made me cry. This book changed the way I viewed comics as a medium. It's like... I mean, that's just not something you want to kind of put out there if somebody's going to be like, well, I thought this book was stupid. Because then
something we say a lot is like, well, what Manix brought up is like, it's okay to acknowledge the problematic elements in a book and still love it. That's one thing that we say a lot. But two, for what Joe's saying, I guess I often say, like, no two people are going to have the same experience with a comic. And so while this comic moved you and made you cry and that has so much to do with where you were in your life when you experienced that and what it did to you. And that's part of the beauty of the medium. But it's also one of the difficult things about podcasting because we're reading these books every week. We don't have time sometimes to really like dig into them, enjoy them, put ourselves in the right mindset to let them affect us in the way that they first affected us.
Yeah, I think that we've proven in the 120-something episodes that we've done just on our show, you can find something to criticize about absolutely any book.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that there's been a single book that we've done where everybody has universally praised it and nobody has had a single negative thing to say.
Maybe Infinite Crisis, I think.
Miss Marvel?
But I think the counterpoint to that is that doing this show for so long, you learn how to tease out the things that you like in a book, even a book you don't like. You learn to recognize the things that you can appreciate and enjoy about different works and really grow to understand yourself better as a person and recognize what you like and what you don't and why that is and what makes a good comic for you.
Well, it helps you find more comics that you'll like, too.
Yeah.
And start to see those trends.
Just quickly dovetailing back to what Kayleigh was saying, like, I've definitely hit that moment where I just had a breakdown. Joe can attest around, I think, issue 80 of Ultimate Spider-Man in 1 week.
God.
I was just done. I couldn't do it anymore.
You don't like people just standing around talking for no fucking reason in a Bendis book? You don't love that?
Oh, God.
But I think that there is something good in every comic book.
Yeah. You guys...
I was going to touch on what Joe said. Dylan and I don't always agree. And when we don't agree is the best part of our podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He is saying, I sternly believe this about this particular thing. And I'm like, well, I believe this about it. And then we get a really good discussion going. And there have been a couple of episodes where we have managed to change the other person's opinion on the book through the discussion. I think the one you always cite is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles City of War. You want to say that?
Oh, yeah. So it was like early 90s story, and reading through it, I wasn't really enthused about it. I was like, this is kind of crap. It's weird. I don't get it. We started talking about it, and we brought in like the whole idea of Bushido Code and the idea of honor for the Ninja Turtles and everything that's going on, and it completely just flipped my opinion of this book. It was 1,000 times better having talked about it than it was just having read it.
It's such an iconic story, too.
Yeah, and you know, I didn't know it was iconic at the time, and I was just like, this is not great. And then we talked about it, and
but they're
this is
turtles, they're ninjas.
It's so much more than that, man.
I'm just saying that's all I needed.
They're not just turtles. They're not just ninjas. They are turtle ninjas.
Yeah.
And that is a whole different ballpark.
Manix is easy, just not cheap.
Yeah.
There was a
Don't
book
you
we did
forget
that. You did that. You walked in. There was. A
Oh,
book
yeah, there's been more than one book where I've walked into it having one opinion and had somebody say the one thing that I needed to hear to make everything click for me and completely change the way that I thought about the book.
Yeah, there was one. I can't remember what it is, of course, but
I do remember there was one specific book where I walked into it hating it, and then everybody was like, oh, it was so funny. This was such a great comedy. I was like, this book is funny?
It was Mystery Society.
Yeah, it was Mystery Society. I read that entire book, and I was like, this just seems weirdly off kilter to me. I don't get it. And they're like, it's a joke. I was like, it is?
And you were like, oh.
I completely missed it. But I can't remember an example offhand, but there have been books where I was like,
really
now
proud
I
of
get
myself.
it. Now I understand it. And I needed that conversation to contextualize it for me.
Yeah, if you can get over the urge to strangle the person you're talking with about whatever because they're disagreeing with you vehemently, then you can usually get to a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, I think the episodes that I think are at least successful are the ones where we all are kind of in agreement.
That's
We're all
boring.
just kind of
I
looking
agree,
at each
sir.
other
I
like,
agree.
"Oh,
Let's
that's
shake hands
pretty
and
good."
leave the room skipping. Okay.
No conflict.
Did everybody like it? Yep. All right.
Although that does sometimes lead to a really interesting conversation because we're like, I liked it. I liked it too. What else are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
And that's when we get into the weird shit.
Muppet sex.
No, never again. Never again.
Well, you know, the person that you are in the experiences you've been through, those filter everything that you consume.
Yeah.
And like we're doing Pride Month right now on Fridge, and one of my all-time favorite graphic novels is Capote in Kansas. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's a very moving work about Truman Capote going to this town in Kansas after there's been a murder, enmeshing himself with the people. They've made several movies about it. Philip Seymour Hoffman and Capote being the best of the ones that I've seen. But and I saw that beforehand, so that of course filtered how I read the book.
Well, he's doing the research for In Cold Blood.
Yeah, he's doing In Cold Blood, an amazing novel which I just read last week after reading the graphic novel. Oh, it's so good.
It's not just a novel. It's nonfiction.
It's okay.
It's a nonfiction novel.
It is very
One of a
beautifully
kind,
written.
man.
But
It's creative
we go into the
nonfiction.
story, and you know my perspective.
It's an actual word.
I'm a straight white male, the most boring thing ever. But that's who I am. That's my bias on whatever I consume. A dear friend of the show, Jeb Corzilius, he's a gay man, and so he read the story differently than I did, and there was things in the story that offended him, and we had a good conversation about it, and he's not wrong. None of the things, and I don't feel that I'm wrong, but it's the way the drawings are on the page, the way things play out. They are open to interpretation.
Well, in your experiences, colors everything.
Yeah, and that's what I like about the show is those are exciting moments to me. That it's like it's you don't have to convert someone to your way of thinking. You don't necessarily have to turn someone on.
It's not
to
about
the things
winning.
that you're on. Yeah, it's not about I'm not like I won podcast.
Gold star.
But we had a good conversation, and I look at Capote in Kansas differently now. It's still one of my favorite books, and I still think it's a really good work. But I understand why that could be seen as problematic, and
Yeah.
I totally get it.
A lot of it's having an honest conversation and looking at yourself and your opinions honestly too, why you have them, which really helps you reshape your views and reshape how you see the world by filtering it through someone who has different life experiences and different views and different cultures and all that, their views, so you can have a deeper, more meaningful understanding. Even if it changes how you view a medium, you're seeing it that much richer for having that much more of an angle to look at it.
Yeah. Great.
Word?
Absolutely. Word. What advice would you have to any aspiring podcasters out there?
Do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just get a microphone, buy a cheap $15 pen mic, download a free program like Audacity, get a friend or friends, and just start talking about what you love.
Yeah, just
Everything
do it and
else
keep
will come
doing it.
into place.
Yeah.
I would actually say that I hate Audacity. I know
I
most
do
of the
too,
podcasts.
but it's free.
Well, it is free, and I get it. Most of the podcasts I listen to use it. I attempted, and I couldn't do it. And
well, the thing is, you'll find out what software works for you later. You'll find out what mics work for you later. Like, we started with all the wrong stuff. We figured it out. But the point is, don't wait until you have all of the right stuff in place before you start putting the show out. Like, just start making it, because that other stuff will follow. And at least at that point, you'll have learned stuff. And just don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, just
make a lot of them early.
Just start doing it and keep doing it, and don't stop.
Yeah, don't break the chain.
Don't let anybody tell you that you're terrible or you can't do it or you shouldn't be doing it.
Embrace the hate mail.
Yeah,
we asked for hate mail. I love it.
We are not.
I got some good one this week. I got to share with you later.
Nice.
We're not at the place 2.5 years in that we were when we started.
No way.
And if we had waited until we are where we are now, we would have never gotten there. We had to do those first 2 years just getting better to be what I would consider a decent show.
Well, you have to get the mistakes out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd also don't be afraid to ask for help. Yeah, because we recorded our episode. The first one somehow sounded fine and came out okay. I learned very quickly that was an accident, because the next time I tried to record us, it sounded like fuck all and didn't come out for like a year afterwards, after some post-processing voodoo. But somehow I accidentally recorded the podcast correctly, but then I was like, how do I upload it? I don't know anything about computers. Apparently, I thought I did. I registered this domain name. I got thefridge.com. I was like so proud of myself. So I had to ask Andrew for help, and I had to ask Tobiah for help.
I sent him to Toby because I don't know how to do that.
So I had to ask for help. I'm like, you guys podcast. How do podcast? And, I had to ask many, many questions. And then even past that, I kept having website problems. And I've got a couple friends that are developers. And I just, like, one dude, I had him over to my house. Like, I will buy you some Mountain Dew. Just come sit at my place. And, I will just type, and you can point out what I'm doing wrong. So, don't be afraid to ask for help, because I know nothing about computers, and I somehow am able to do it with, a lot of help.
Yeah, I think you'll find, like, once you get started, a lot of people are drawn to that and want to help you and want to be a part of it. You just need to get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to keep in mind that people don't necessarily listen to podcasts to hear something new. Podcasting is largely about the voice you bring. So don't not make a comic book podcast because there's already, so many podcasts out there. Whatever. Like, I listen to 8 or 9 separate improv comedy podcasts because each one brings something different to the table.
Yeah, you want to talk about something you're passionate about and something that you can speak on, whether or not what you're saying is original. The fact that you're saying it makes it original.
Yeah.
Because you haven't said it before.
Yeah. And like your voice, you will develop your voice as you go. Like you're not going to go into it knowing exactly how you feel about things. The important thing is to be honest with yourself, and the important thing is to just do it and do it consistently. You will develop that voice as you go along. And that's why people will listen to you. To listen to not just what you have to say, but the way you say it, to listen to the interactions you have with the other people you're saying it to. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've really found, is that like our audience found us. And I think that's, you're going to have to realize that your audience will find you if you keep doing what you're doing.
One of the most comments we get actually are just on our kind of random stories and non sequiturs. When I get really ADD, and I started with like notes, and a lot of the podcasts I listen to, they'll go really into like, here is the plot of the book, and we will go through the basic outline, and then we'll go through page by page breaking it down. And I was like, cool, that's really cool, and I like that. I want to try to make that show. I don't have it in me to make that show. I think it's interesting that there's podcasts that do that, and they can go page by page, and like on the artist page, it's interesting that this guy does this thing. And I definitely think there's merit to that, and a lot of the shows I listen to do that. My show's not like that. We tried. It just felt weird and forced, and it felt like I was giving a book report or something. So the show kind of turned into just, our personal stuff filtered in to everything, and we get comments on all the time, like, oh, I really like that story you told, thank you. And people will even like, please read this on the air, and they'll give us their own stories that they're comfortable sharing. And so that's kind of like, we've kind of, I feel like we're still finding it, but that's kind of the voice is just, be yourself. There's a reason that you do the show and not like your neighbor or whatever. And so I just say embrace that, because there's only one you, regardless of, what the book is you're covering.
What about you guys?
I wanted to add that I'm a planner. So what he just said, we do the exact.
No, you guys are the opposite of us.
We do the exact opposite. In fact, I've started printing out our outline for Dylan. The one we're recording after this, the outline is 7 pages long. So while it is not all scripted, we have the summary that's written out, so we read that. We have the Education Alley section is written out, we read that, and then we have our talking points and our sub-points that we want to make sure to touch in each of those talking points. And that's the point where the real discussion happens, so that's not the scripted part. But we need those talking points written down so we make sure we hit everything. And also it doubles for me when I'm editing. I can put the timestamps of when we hit those topics and put a episode guide out as well. So there's that aspect. Then there's also just... When I went to make this, I'm like, okay, what kind of a podcast do I want to make? Okay, I want to talk about comics. What's not out there? And there's a lot of comics podcasts. I know you were saying you listen to 8 or 9 of the same type of podcasts because they're all slightly different. Well, there's a lot of comics podcasts out there that cover the books of the week. There's a lot that cover a single issue. I had not found one that covers comic book story arcs, so that's what we decided to do, because you take basically a trade paperback and you cover that in one episode. You're covering mostly a complete story, and then you can talk about what's in the story as well as if it's possibly leading to anything, things like that. So I tried to find something that felt like it met a niche that I hadn't seen out there. Yeah. So there was that. Then we backlogged 6 to 8 episodes before we ever released one, just because I knew I download podcasts, when they come out, and I have a queue that I manage just of my own. I don't use any kind of system that I probably should, but a lot of podcasts that are very intermittent drive me crazy. So I wanted to make sure we will always hit the date we're going to release, and we have. We haven't missed it except by maybe one day in 3 years of podcasting. We always put out when we say we will. So I'm a very planner-heavy person, and you can see that in how we do the podcast. So if you're capable of doing that, I would say do that, because you're going to make your listeners very happy. They can count on you. They know when it's coming out, and they know what they're going to get in each episode.
Yeah.
Anybody done the opposite of him where?
Yes.
Literally every time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the question was, has anyone ever done the opposite, where you don't have the outline and you've just read the comic or have never read it before, and that's kind of our show is more. We started around the same time that Arc Reaction started. I think we started recording in 2012. And didn't put out an episode for that whole first year because we didn't have a name till episode 7. Nothing came out. We didn't have a website until episode 7 or 8 was out. When I first started talking to Toby about the podcast, it was like, hey, I've got all these episodes and I don't know what to do with them. And now I need help with the computer part of it. How do I get them to the internet? Who do I mail them to? And so, that's how that discussion started. But it's kind of like what we mentioned before, where it's just start making stuff. Eventually, the rest will catch up. And so our show, kind of very much like what John is talking about, is we wanted to do something that we hadn't seen before. So we were like, what if we just did a book club, but with comic books? And then just recorded it. So ours is very
Oprah's book club.
Oprah Winfrey's Comic Book of the Month Club was our working title for the first 7 episodes.
There are definitely episodes where we're sitting there doing sound checks and somebody's finishing reading the book, as we're sitting there.
Because ours is very much, it's more organic. It's more about hey, you read this. This is how do you feel about the book?
This is a book club. We're just here to talk about what was your thoughts on the book. Don't deconstruct it, don't review it, don't criticize it, just tell me how you felt about it. What was your experience reading it?
Very hesitant to be called a reviewer. I'm not a fan of that. So it's just all, for me, it's all about bringing exposure to people. So regardless of whether I have anything interesting to say, I always encourage the listeners to play along at home, which is we announced the book the week before that we're going to do for the next week. So hopefully everyone's read it by the time we get to the next episode. So it's less about kind of the educational side of it for us and more about listeners at home, you played along, you read this, listen to us talk about it, and then send us your questions or your reactions, and it hopefully be a big play along game.
That's definitely what Fridge morphed into, and I feel like we've kind of embraced that chaos and change, because it started as walking through every book, and then it turned into just sometimes a discussion barely touching on the actual book itself, but more of just the tropes and themes that it encompass. And I listen back to every show, and I usually feel really good walking away from it. But there's definitely been some where I'm like, man, I don't know how much we actually I don't know if anyone knows what that book is actually about, as far as that guy's name was Bob and he went to the store and then had a bad day because we took that into I'm not going to say derailed it because I feel like that was the jumping off point to the conversation, but the whole conversation ended up being about the sexism of this creator in this particular book or whatever.
You guys kind of assume that people have read it,
and we do make that assumption, definitely, which is not really positive or negative. It's just kind of there. We're trying. The last episode, I did do a kind of preamble, here's the very loose plot of the book, just in case you didn't get to play along at home, and then go into the real meat and potatoes of it. So that's still the same.
Did you guys have any fun stories about starting out? Any fun mistakes or?
Oh, great. Okay, so I, for better or worse, I have 4 cats.
Every good story starts like that.
So we had just gotten this little gray kitten who ended up being this massive moose cat now. But it's a little gray kitten. Me and John are sitting down to record our first episode. And this adorable little gray kitten walks into my office, sits there for 5 minutes and walks out. He ripped the nastiest cat ass fart I'd ever smelled in my life. I turned to John and I said, "Did you just shit yourself?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh dear God." And I'm like, we had the windows open and everything. We had to evacuate the room for a good 15 minutes. So it's where we are initially, before we came up with the West Coast Podvengers, which is this table.
First official meeting.
Yes. By the way, that's
us.
That's us. John and I were originally going by the moniker Cat Interrupted Productions because having 4 cats, somewhere between a cat farting and another cat constantly meowing, 2 cats getting into a fight in the office and just howling and screaming, we were constantly having to stop. And
the fact is, nobody really knew this because I would cut it out of the episode, so it was kind of an inside joke until I found a couple that actually sounded where normally when I'm listening back through to do my editing, it doesn't sound as bad on the recording as it did to us in the room. Mm-hmm. So we derailed ourselves when we really could have just kept going and no one would have noticed. But I finally got a couple that were loud enough. I left them in so people would understand where the Cat Interrupted Productions came from.
We record downtown, both views and a fridge, and you definitely get some pretty hilarious. I don't think they ever really get picked up.
It never gets picked up.
It never gets picked up, but we have the window open because it gets hot as Satan's ass in that room.
Stupid seagulls, man.
Yeah, you think birds, and there's this I told Johnny I had his money. Just random, just people downtown. So we're right across from the reef, and there's always some colorful characters there. The Super Bowl Sunday was amazing. Because we did record that day, and there was there was a very jovial gentleman walking down.
It was before the Super Bowl.
The week before. That's right.
When they found out they were going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, she was like, "See, Hawks, see, Hawks," just bumping down the street, just singing to himself,
just yelling Super Bowl.
That's right. Yeah,
Super Bowl,
Super Bowl, see, Hawks.
And then sometimes we get Guitar Guy on the corner.
Oh, I love Guitar Guy. He's out there doing his spaghetti western
Manix has kids, so we record Sunday night and we start at 10 or 11 p.m.
Yeah.
Which means we finish regularly between 2 and 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And there's always stuff going on downtown on a Sunday
Half the time
night.
there's cops and whatever. But yeah, so it's fun as you're recording to not get yourself distracted. You're someone just got stabbed, for real. Keep going. The audience doesn't know that. They can't hear it. We can hear it, but the mics aren't picking it up. Just keep rolling.
Really good podcasting advice. Really good life advice.
Don't get stabbed. That's good life advice.
Don't get stabbed and lock the cat out.
Yeah, get a better office than what we have. That's the podcasting advice.
How have your guys' lives changed since the inception of each of your shows?
Do you guys want to start? You guys have been traveling a lot.
That's the biggest thing. So my buddy that lives in Denver, I've known him since I was in college, and he works out there now, so he moved out there from California. He just told me last year on a whim, "You should apply for media at Denver Comic Con." I'm like, okay, sure, probably won't get it. Got in, so I went last year by myself because Dylan couldn't get time off. Went, and it wasn't as good last year as far as being treated like media. I was pretty much I didn't have to pay to go to the convention. I had to pay to get there and pay for hotel, and then they didn't really they set one interview up for me, and the guy didn't show up, so then I had to reschedule it myself for the next day. But this year, Dylan was able to go with me, and they changed the way they did media. We had 9 interviews.
Yeah.
9 scheduled interviews. Well, 7 of them were scheduled. 2 of them we found while we were there. And it's just amazing. We had to put out 2 episodes for con coverage because our total interviews was about an hour and a half worth of audio. So we have 2 like 50-minute episodes where him and I talking is maybe like 20 minutes total between the episodes, other than just what we said in the interviews. So the traveling's great. The getting contacted by indie publishers, that's something I never thought would happen. Like, we get inundated with books and we can't possibly cover them all. And then just, trying out a whole bunch of different comics that I wouldn't otherwise.
And I mean, just to touch on that real quick, to humble brag, but like we got to interview Marguerite Bennett, we got Steve Lealoa, just a slew of these amazing people. But we're getting to do stuff like Central City and Yakima. We're getting to do we're doing a freaking panel at a comic book like here.
Yeah,
this right now.
We're doing 2 in Central City. This is the first time I've been behind the table on a panel, so I'm a little freaking out. But we're getting to do things that I'd only get to dream of as a guy who loves comic books, who loves the comic book stories and all this amazing things that get put out. And now I'm getting to, in my own small little way, participate in this amazing culture and talking to these amazing people and getting to hang out with some really, really rad individuals. Not this guy.
Because I'm fucking majestic.
I work him too hard.
Yeah, talking about hating people you podcast with. No.
Yeah, to re-answer Monty's question of what's the hardest thing about podcasting, you're talking to your co-hosts? No.
I legit love this guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's all fun.
Tell the Lake Fair story.
The Lake Fair?
Last year at Lake Fair.
Oh, God. My memory is awful. This happens, but... So I went to Lake Fair with podcast founder Bernard, who just happened to be in town with me. He was on like the first 2 episodes of the show, and then he had to move away to college. So
because he didn't want to be on the podcast.
Yeah, he left town. That's how bad he didn't want to be on the show.
It's gotten better.
But yeah, we were hanging out at Lake Fair, and I ordered a burger, and the guy's like, "Hey, are you Andrew Chard?" And I was like, "I am, in fact. Should I recognize you?" And he's like, "Oh, you're on View from the Gutters." And I was like, "Wow." And I was like, "You have to watch the video show too. Otherwise, I hope you didn't recognize me just from my voice." But he did watch the video show. But it was just like getting recognized is weird. But I don't know. I didn't.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
But you've been getting a lot of submissions because you started doing Singles Club.
I started a sub show reviewing small press books. So I've been getting a lot of emails from independent creators about that, which is a lot of fun. Actually, I had a recent interaction where I put out my review, and then the creator emailed me because they had not contacted me previously. I just grabbed this book off the shelf, and they said it's so gratifying to have somebody who understands what you're trying to do. They're like, "Can I please send you a signed copy of this because I appreciate your review so much?" And that's really gratifying. Just that interaction where somebody's putting something out, and you get what they're doing, and they get that you get what they're doing. Like that. Being simpatico with a creator and feeling that connection, it's a great feeling. I was, up on tippy toes all day long.
Having that communication open up is a huge thing too, and it's only relatively recently, probably in the last year, that we've started to really communicate with creators more. And it's been
absolutely
quite a lot of fun. Twitter conversations with Anthony Johnston. And,
actually, Joe and I were at Emerald City this year. And we met Anthony Johnston and had like a 20-minute conversation with him, just talking about our show because we'd reviewed a couple of his books, or we talked about a couple of his books, and just going back and forth with him about comic books, what his thoughts are, and it was a really great moment of connection.
There were a couple of times at Emerald City this year where I ran into people and I was like, "Yeah, I do a podcast," and they're like, "Which one?" A View from the Gutters, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I like you guys." And it was like, "Oh yeah, that's not a big deal. I'm not going to go around this corner and jump up and down for 5 minutes because you said that." But we got press passes to Rose City last year, which was super awesome. I can't go this year because my stupid sister's getting married that weekend.
Stupid.
She's like, "You have to be there." I'm like, "Who cares? It's a Comic-Con. You can get married any old time."
You can get married at the Comic-Con.
Yeah, right. That would be a
Her dressed as Scarlet Witch, him dressed as Vision, you know.
Yeah, your sister would love that.
Oh god, yes, she would. She totally would not take a chainsaw to me.
But yeah, you guys went to Rose City. I didn't get to go this year, but you guys went.
I went in your stead.
Yeah, you went with my name tag.
Yeah,
yes.
I was Andrew Chard for the weekend.
And it's very gratifying to feel like. I mean, I guess being recognized, of course, is gratifying, but it's also nice to have a creator come up to you and be like, your episode meant a lot to me. Like, it's not like Doug Tenapple tweeted at us.
Oh, yeah.
About, like, actually, I think wrote a bit on his blog about us and, like,
Step on stage.
Yeah. And, I mean, you had an awesome encounter with the
pennies.
Right? ElfQuest, yeah, with the pennies.
Oh, yeah.
And Wendy.
Wendy and Richard Penny, who did ElfQuest, I wrote a blog post about ElfQuest and what it meant to me and the way in which it's kind of unique in the comics industry. And I had a really great interaction because they read that and they were like, that is our favorite thing that we've seen this year. That was so great. Mm-hmm. And, man, I was dancing down the aisle after that one.
It's just becoming part of the community, I think, is the biggest thing that's changed for us. It was always fun to be kind of a spectator on the community or be like the fringe involvement, but just kind of carving away and making some room for ourselves and becoming part of a community that talks about comics and promotes comics and loves comics has changed a lot for us. So
yeah.
I think that's good.
Another thing that changes too, I'm not gonna brag like these guys, but is sort of the way is the way that you approach different things where you're like, oh damn, like I want to talk about this book or I want to talk about this issue, and you're like, I don't have room on the main show. Well, you know what, I'll just make a whole nother show. Yeah, it's fine. And like I have none that have yet come to fruition, but I have like 3 different projects in the work right now, and it's funny how you're just like, yeah, I can make another show. It's fine. Mm-hmm. And how that starts mounting.
Mm-hmm. Question.
So when you review licensed comics, what steps do you have to take to not alienate the target audience? Is that the people who love the source material?
We have 3 minutes left.
That's
okay,
that's
I
never
got
something I would worry about. I guess I don't worry about defending ever. I mean, if you're talking about a licensed property, I guess the thing that would change criteria-wise is how faithful is it to that license. Mm-hmm. That would be an added step, but otherwise it's the same. Is it racist? Is it fucked up? Is it funny? Is it supposed to be? Is it entertaining? Is the art good? I mean, like a lot of the same things. It's just with the added, like, is it The Simpsons? Does it feel like The Simpsons? And that I have a basis for.
Yeah.
I would add to that we haven't done one where we were unfamiliar with the licensed property going into it. I would feel more concerned if I was tackling something like Buffy where I didn't watch the show because it just wasn't something I watched when it was on originally. But something like Star Wars or Star Trek where I know it intimately, I feel like I can speak to that as a member of that fan base, and it's then my opinion of a knowledgeable member of that fan base, and I would assume any other knowledgeable member of that fan base will go, okay, this is what he likes, this is what he doesn't like, and not be offended because I know what I'm talking about. I just am talking about my particular likes and dislikes about it, not necessarily someone who has no idea what the product is trying to review and talk about it.
And even then, it's integrity overall. You have to be honest. You can't let that taint whether it's something you love or something you don't. If you're not being truthful to yourself and truthful to the audience, you're just a character.
Yeah.
I think it becomes a matter of still reviewing the work with all of the same qualifications that you review any other work. Mm-hmm. So, like the Adventure Time licensed comics. I love Adventure Time, but those comics don't get a free pass just because I love the source material. So they all get evaluated fairly. And granted, because I like them, they've passed it. But if something like the Buffy comics or something didn't pass that, then they just don't pass. It's not really a matter of what will the original fans feel about the way I review this. It's more of, does this work stand on its own, and how does it represent its source material as a side along? Have we
ever done a book where you weren't familiar with the original source material and then we had to talk about the book? Because that happens on top of the stack a lot, but
I don't think we have.
I don't think so.
Because I'm old and I don't know anything that the kids watch these days.
I mean, it's not just that. It's like I did.
What is Bob's Burgers? I don't know. I'm scared.
I did.
I didn't when they. I do now. I've rectified.
We talked about
34. I got kids.
We talked about The Witcher, which is a comic book based on a video game based on a novel, of which I had not played the video game or read the novel yet. But I talked about the comic, and I enjoyed it, and so I started reading the novel. So I think in a lot of ways it's fun to have that, like read the adaptation and then talk about the source material. Transformers was another one like that for me, where we read the comic book, or I read the comic book. I guess did the comic come first on that though?
No.
Okay, so it was an adaptation.
It was at the same time, but they're both adaptations of toys or licensed from toys. And the Marvel comic invented a lot of the names of the characters, so it was very contemporaneous with the cartoon.
So, yeah.
Right. On that note, let's give it up for our wonderful podcasters here.
Thank you.
Thanks for showing up, guys.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
And thanks for coming to our comics podcasting in Olympia panel.
In 30 minutes, I will see you at OCC.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. And
enjoy the rest of the festival, guys. Thanks.
And if anyone is interested, we have business cards and stickers.
Please take a card.
Feel free to take a few.
Take them. If you guys have any questions for us, we'll hang around for a few minutes. If you guys want to talk.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
And thanks everyone for listening at home who played along. And we'll catch you guys on a regular episode.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for listening to our show, everybody. Special thanks to theouthousers.com for posting our episodes. You can always keep up to date with everything we're doing by checking out our website at viewfromthegutters.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at FRTHGutters. And please be sure to leave us an iTunes review, as it really does help new listeners find the show. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.